Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So there is a brand new book out, and it's a true crime mystery that's been quietly covered up over the years. It hasn't been 100% covered up, and it involves, yes, Stanford University, yes, my alma mater, and shockingly, I think it was totally covered up while I was there in the whole .com era, because I never knew that the founder of Stanford University, the wife, had died under mysterious circumstances. And I don't know how this channel has evolved into mysterious circumstances under corruption, politics, and authoritarianism, but Gilded Age San Francisco sounds a lot like current day South Korea. And the way that Leland Stanford Sr., the former governor of California, the robber baron tycoon, sounds a lot like a Korean conglomerate owner that went into politics, that started a university, that wielded his power, and then had a wife who died under mysterious circumstances. So we're going to get into it because there's a brand new book that came out, and it was written by a Stanford professor, no less, so they're spilling the tea. They're comfortable with it now at Stanford, so that's really cool. So the book is called Who Killed Jane Stanford? A Gilded Age Tale of Murder, Deceit, Spirits, and the Birth of a University. Now, because I'm a Stanford alum, I was able to go on a Zoom call this morning where there was a presentation by the Stanford Historical Society where he gave a talk exclusively for the Stanford Historical Society and mainly for the members, but I guess the alumni were allowed to go in on it. The book was released yesterday, from what I believe, and he wouldn't give the person he believed to be the culprit. He went, Stanford, okay? Stanford professor. So he did his research. He was really meticulous, but he wants you to buy the book. And I am going to totally respect his business, right? Because he gotta earn his paycheck as well. And it just came out yesterday, so I can't read the book, but I just did buy the Audible, so I will include the Amazon links in the description below, but I will listen to the audiobook. But he did create a presentation that was probably even more interesting than had he just said, this is who I believe did it, because he wanted to create a historical account, but since his brother actually is a crime fiction author, he got advice from his brother to try to make his academic type of work be more of a fiction novel, so it's more fun for us to read. So it's totally the true crime genre, and I just wanted to introduce it to you because this is crazy. Because when I was there, I always felt like there was always something, the way that history, the way that they were always hiding something from us, that there was something creepy going on, because this woman, Jane Stanford, totally rich woman, inherited the university, and it was in its early days then, and she was into spirits and stuff. And remember, this university was founded in 1885 as a commemoration, as kind of like this altar to her dead son, who died at the age of 15 when they were over in Europe and Italy and Florence, and he died of typhoid fever, and she was heartbroken by it. And during the late 19th century, the thing that was in vogue at that time was seances and trying to commune with the dead. And so she was all up into talking to ghosts. And I kid you not, there was something a little bit I felt like there was ghosts on that campus, okay? And they did say that that a lot of that land was used to be also Native American burial land So there was a lot of different spirits like walking around, and not to mention just crazy people as well. So there was just like a lot of weird energy. And then also underneath they made the Stanford Linear Accelerator, I forget, center. And so there's only 2 places in the world where they try to recreate the Big Bang, in Stanford and then also in CERN in Switzerland, where they try to like send the the atoms or the protons and then try to make them collide. So I think there's some energy there. Anyhow, she was poisoned, you all. They tried to poison her twice, and they succeeded on the second try. Crazy. So let's start at the end and then work our way backwards like we always do. She died in Hawaii. I had no idea. She fled to Hawaii because she had gotten poisoned the first time in her Nob Hill mansion. It's like 50 rooms in San Francisco. And so that happened in 1905, and I believe that was in January 14th, 1905. She was at home, and she took a sip of her bottled water, Poland Springs, which is still in existence, and that's from like the East Coast, so she was importing East Coast bottled water, and she tasted it, and it tasted bitter, and she already knew that it tasted like poison, and I guess even back then they had the ability to get it diagnosed and sent for analysis, and it came back as poison and confirmed that it had strychnine. And for, readers of Anne of Avonlea, remember, or Anne of Green Gables, like strychnine, like there was like that chapter about like, people, if you wanted to kill other people, you use strychnine. So I guess that was a real thing. And so she got scared, and then she's like, okay, see y'all, I'm gonna flee to Hawaii, take a break. And so she checked into the Moana Hotel, which is still there on Waikiki. I think it's now called the Ala Moana Hotel, and luxury. And so there she always had some sort of ritual at the end of the day to, I guess, it's a thing to like put baking soda in some water to kind of quell your stomach. And so she drank that, but that was poisoned. And then by midnight, she was like throwing up and she was in pain, and then she passed away. Now, then the doctors there and the investigators there said that it was poisoning. Now, what was shady was that in a few days, the president of Stanford University at the time, David Starr Jordan, came over to Hawaii, and then soon the media reports over on the mainland started to shift and say that she had died of natural causes. And then the narrative from that point forward was that she just had a heart attack, and that there was absolutely no murder, and that this was a natural death, which is why I had no idea. Nobody had any idea. And whenever we had that Founders Day celebration, my advisor was one of the dudes who dressed up as Stanford, and his wife was dressed up as Leland Stanford, and they just like did a happy old time, like, recreating like as if everything was hunky-dory, but everything was not. It was super dramatic. And let's go over why there may be a lot of people out there that had it in for her. Now, she was a widow, so she was kind of alone. Why? Because her husband had passed away in 1893. They founded the university in 1885. That's why it's called Leland Stanford Junior University. So that's why people always kidded, made fun of us, especially the Cal folks, saying like, oh, you go to a junior college. No, it's because the son was Leland Stanford Jr., the father was Leland Stanford Sr., and the college or the university was there to commemorate the son. And so she was obsessed with, memorializing them. And actually, like in the quad, like the architecture was different then, because the earthquake 1902, I believe, ruined a lot of the buildings. So the archway was bigger, the church looked different, and then also the art museum looked different. And then actually there was like a statue of the family, like the founding family, that was there. Now it's like a Rodin sculpture garden there. But this was like kind of a shrine for the family, and especially the son. And tidbit, I think they say the black squirrels are there because, like, you know, I've never seen black squirrels before I went to Stanford, but they said that there were black squirrels there because the son brought them over from Europe. I don't know if that's real, but they're really overfed because Stanford people eat good. Now, so in 1893 is when her husband died. And during that time, it was a very bad financial situation for the United States. So the university was struggling. And apparently, Mrs. Stanford quite strikes me as like a bit of a control freak and a narcissist. And so she was micromanaging everything, and she really wanted this university to be more of like, again, all about her son and legacy, and then trying to like commune with the spirits. And she was spending a lot of money on the buildings instead of the actual kind of education. So she wasn't able to apparently attract the best and the brightest professors. I mean, right now, come on, like, you know, top notch. But back when it was being founded, it was having a bit of a trouble. And you guys remember, oh, you guys probably wouldn't know, but they really originally wanted to endow a building or something at Harvard University, and they got rejected because I guess they were considered new money or something back then. And so they said, fine, we're going to go to California and build our university. And so they got their first president, who I don't think was also top drawer. I think he was more bottom of the barrel. He was, I think, from Indiana or something, David Starr Jordan. And he was expert in fish. I don't know if they have that major anymore in any part of the world, but he majored in fish. And so he was also a racist, a eugenicist, a misogynist. So he was not a very nice person. And he clashed so much with Mrs. Stanford. And in one way, he wanted to increase the quality of the education of the school. And he was, in battle with Mrs. Stanford over her spending. But then there was a very famous battle that she had with him over how much he spent over door jambs, like the things that connect the door to the frame. And she's like, I can't believe you spent $2.50 for each door jamb, which comes out to about $85, I think, in today's money. And so I guess maybe she was retaliating against like him talking about how much she was spending on like the art museum or like the church or something like that. And so the reason why he's kind of a suspect is that he was gonna get fired, like basically days before she died. And so because she died, he kept his job for years after so he basically went there. Like when you think about it, he went, like after she died in Hawaii, he went there and patched things up. They hired a private detective not to get to the truth, but to cover up the story. And then he continued on as the president of Stanford University. So that's kind of crazy. Also, he was very familiar with the poison strychnine, because apparently the way he fished was like he didn't go fishing like this. He just like poured strychnine into the pond, and then like when the fish just died, he just scooped them up. Not only that, apparently there's another really big suspect, the lady servant of Mrs. Stanford. Because, if you saw Downton Abbey, you know how they always have the maid servants, like dressing them and doing their hair or something, and they're always the favorite. There was one lady named Bertha, and she was really hot. She was like a real hot thing. And then it could have been something like there was something going on with Mr. David Starr Jordan. And Mrs. Stanford even bought her a house and everything. But Mrs. Stanford was like a really difficult woman to please. And she's always like, like making people be on call. But apparently there could have been something between the two. And people are wondering whether David Starr Jordan had influenced the maidservant to administer the poison, because when she was poisoned in San Francisco, there were a lot of people that could have been there and have done it. And it was very racist at the time. So people were pointing their fingers at the Chinese house servant, and they call them the houseboy or something. So apparently the reports back then was it's supposed to be the Chinese house servant, and Mrs. Stanford was really mean to him because he was supposed to get some sort of inheritance from like when Mr. Stanford died, but then she took it and said like, oh, well, when I die, I'll give it to you. So you have to keep working for me until I die. So then, then there's kind of motive maybe for, her to die faster so that he can go back home to China. But it most likely wasn't him because he wasn't in Hawaii. Who was in Hawaii? Bertha was in Hawaii, who ran from the Bay Area to Hawaii to patch things up. David Starr Jordan did. So it looks pretty fishy, like the connection over there. And then also, Bertha had been embezzling from Mrs. Stanford, even though she got a house out of her, but she'd been embezzling. But apparently the standard practice of the day, like in that whole Downton Abbey Gilded Age type thing, was, their wages were so low that the standard practice was whenever there were expenses that the servants had to take care of, and especially if they went on trips, they would pad it a little bit and then keep the extra. Why does it sound like Korea? So they would always try to go on the trips even though it was exhausting for them. So they were just shady. Apparently, the author, when he was saying like he was trying to write it so that he could follow a hero, he said there were no heroes. He said everybody was so shady. Shady, 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 shady. He said the police were corrupt. The police back then were so corrupt that they could have been considered organized crime. The Chinatown situation there, also totally organized crime as well. Even Leland Stanford, like the way that he did business, like he was the governor of California, but the way that he enriched himself and made the politics enrich his railroad interests and all the other things, and gave special contracts, and even the university giving special favors, totally was a corrupt machine. Totally. That was the whole Gilded Age era. So this whole romanticizing it, especially with the latest whole Met Ball thing, I think is a little bit irresponsible. I don't think that's where we want to go back to. So apparently, the coroners, when they said it was poisoning, David Starr Jordan also convinced 4 out of the 5 coroners to change it from poisoning to natural causes. Totally shady. Also, David Starr Jordan perpetuated this story that, perhaps Jane Stanford had died because she ate tons of soggy gingerbread in Hawaii, and that's why she probably died, as if it was like food poisoning or something. Now, I thought that was a little bit weird, but in this era, there was a little bit lack of hygiene and, not as much refrigeration because, Zachary Taylor, one of the presidents of the United States, died apparently from food poisoning in 1850. So this is not that long of a time gap in their era. In 1850, Zachary Taylor went to a 4th of July picnic and ate, I guess there was a dish that was popular, cherries in milk, and apparently there was cholera or something inside of the milk or inside the ice water that he drank, because people didn't wash their hands or something like that, and there was lots of cholera in Washington, D.C., because it's also kind of a swamp, and so he died. And so maybe he thought that people would believe it if, in a hot tropical climate, if there's soggy gingerbread, that she might get food poisoning and die. And so it's easy for you to kind of mimic the effects of food poisoning with strychnine. I don't even know what strychnine is used for. I guess like rat poisoning maybe, because rat poison was also a common method to off other people, in that era. And I guess, because there were a lot of rats, I guess you'd always have lots of access to rat poison. So anyhow, Jane Stanford was not the friendliest person. So there were a lot of people that weren't so upset that she was gone, unfortunately, which was really weird. But, people are saying like, well, if it weren't for Jane Stanford, we wouldn't have Stanford University. Because, during that time when there was a lot of a financial crisis, the university almost went under. She would use her own money. She, like, the stories when I was there said that, like, she would even sell her own jewelry to keep the finances afloat. And then perhaps we wouldn't even have Silicon Valley. So after the whole, Mrs. Stanford era, apparently the university progressed, and then the criticism is that they would always just pursue kind of academic areas that really brought in money, like engineering or like, the sciences and whatnot. And so then, Silicon Valley eventually developed, and there we go. We have our beautiful university that's top notch in the world, attracting a lot of talent and great minds, and a lot of I'm gonna say it, but a lot of psychopaths too. I mean, there are a lot of crazy people, and you gotta just Elizabeth Holmes went there, so just gotta say, she wasn't the only one. All right, guys, what do you think? I think you should. I don't know. I'm really excited to listen to this book on audio. Book on Audible, and if you want to read it on Kindle or order the hard book, I think it might be very interesting. I think it is a good thing that I think it's a good development that Stanford is so like, hey, we can talk about this so frankly now. We don't have to kind of like gloss over or cover up our history. We can be real about it, and I think that's like a really great development. So kudos to Stanford, and kudos to this professor for just, being out there like that. He's professor emeritus, so that may make a difference because he's retired. So he's probably not going to, ain't going to be people in the department coming after him because, who's going to check him now? All right, guys. Well, let me know what you think. Put it in the comments below, and remember to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Tune in next time. Don't forget to subscribe. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Love you.